Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and separate the viral hype from the hard data. Look, AI isn't causing mass layoffs, but it is actually doing something much, much worse to young workers. If you've been reading the headlines, you've probably felt that creeping anxiety that artificial intelligence is coming for your livelihood. Well, today we're looking at the 2026 data to reveal a threat that is highly specific, incredibly narrow, and honestly, very hard to see coming if you're just starting out in your career.
We really have to start with the genuine, pure panic we saw back in 2025. You might remember this, and it's important we look at it because it was completely real and worth taking seriously, rather than just brushing it off. A single essay written by an AI executive warning workers to be absolutely terrified of AI blew up. It reached an astonishing 85 million views on X. 85 million. That is just an enormous amount of visibility. It became the dominant narrative because it tapped into a very deep, very human anxiety about the future of work.
And you know this fear? It wasn't just some fringe internet commentary. It came straight from the top. We're talking about Anthropic's own CEO, Dario Amodei, warning of what sounded like an absolute white-collar bloodbath. Back in a May 2025 interview, he literally said unemployment could spike to somewhere between 10 and 20%, and that half of all entry-level white-collar jobs could be eliminated in just 5 years. When the CEO of a leading AI lab, someone who literally sees his company's usage data across every occupation, says something like this, people are going to panic.
Which brings us to part 1, the quiet walkback, revisiting the panic.
But guys, here is the massive twist that almost all the mainstream coverage completely glossed over. Fast forward just 1 year to May 2026, and executives like Amodei and OpenAI's Sam Altman quietly changed their tune. Altman actually admitted he had expected way more entry-level white-collar impact by now than what actually materialized in reality. Both CEOs were substantially revising their positions. Now, quick aside, it is definitely worth noting as context that both of these companies were eyeing IPOs right around this time. But regardless of the motive, the impending doom narrative, it was quietly dialed way back by the exact same people who started it.
So how did they explain this walkback? Well, Amodei pointed to a classic economic concept called the Jevons paradox. Basically, this states that as technology makes work cheaper or more efficient, the total demand for that work actually expands. It doesn't shrink. Think of it like this. If building a software app suddenly costs half as much to do, companies don't fire half their developers, they just demand twice as many apps. In short, automation doesn't necessarily equal fewer total jobs. It might just mean we consume a whole lot more of whatever is being produced, because hey, it's cheaper now.
All right, part 2, the real data. Let's look at what the 2026 stats actually say.
So if it's not an apocalyptic bloodbath out there, what exactly is happening? Well, according to the New York Fed, by the fourth quarter of 2025, the unemployment rate for recent college grads hit 5.6%. But honestly, the real story here is underemployment, which reached a staggering 42.5%. That is the highest it's been since the pandemic. What does that mean? It means these young professionals have jobs, sure, but they're working in roles that don't even require the degrees they just spent years earning. This data absolutely validates the deep, real anxiety young workers are feeling right now. The pain is completely real, it's just highly concentrated.
And a working paper from the Stanford Digital Economy Lab brilliantly illustrates this exact point. They found a highly targeted 16% employment decline specifically for 22 to 25-year-olds working in AI-exposed fields. But get this, senior workers in those exact same occupations, they were left completely untouched. Their employment stayed totally flat. So we aren't seeing broad unemployment rising across the entire workforce. Nope. What we're seeing is a highly targeted hit squarely on the youngest workers.
And to make matters even more urgent, a separate Harvard working paper revealed a mind-blowing 80% drop per quarter in entry-level hiring at companies that are actively adopting generative AI. 80%. This hiring collapse is hitting traditional on-ramps incredibly hard. We're talking about fields like software development and customer service. Historically, these were the main avenues for new grads to get their foot in the door of the white-collar world, to absorb knowledge and learn on the job. And now, those specific doors are slamming shut at AI-adopting firms.
Moving on to part 3, automation versus augmentation. Understanding the real mechanism here. Okay, to survive this shift, we really need to understand exactly why this highly specific hiring freeze is happening in the first place. It all comes down to automation versus augmentation. Historically, entry-level roles involve stuff like writing boilerplate code, drafting first passes on documents, knocking out routine tickets. That is pure execution. And guess what? AI can automate that outright. But senior roles?
They require oversight, complex problem solving, and nuanced human judgment. AI doesn't replace those tasks. Instead, it merely augments the senior worker, allowing them to do way more than before.
So the honest takeaway here is that both extremes of the internet debate are just wrong. We absolutely aren't seeing systematic mass unemployment across the entire economy. A blanket white-collar wipeout, it's just not happening. But at the same time, it's definitely not nothing to worry about. What we are actually witnessing is a surgical disruption of automatable entry-level tasks. The risk is highly concentrated, it's identifiable, it's measurable, and is falling almost entirely on the shoulders of students and early career professionals trying to break into these exposed fields.
So let's get into part 4, how to protect your career. Let's talk practical steps.
If you're a student or an early career professional right now, how do you actually navigate this? Well, the practical move isn't to panic. It's to position yourself. First, you've got to adopt that skill stacking approach we covered back in our 2027 Career Explainer. You need to combine different skills to make yourself uniquely valuable. But more importantly, when you are out there hunting for roles, you must prioritize jobs and tasks that demand human judgment, strategy, and oversight. You want to be the person directing the AI and reviewing its output, not the person whose entire job description is just executing routine automatable work. You need to live on the augmentation side of the equation, for sure.
But all of this leaves us with one pretty terrifying, completely answered question. If AI is rapidly closing the door on entry-level jobs today, where exactly will the next generation of senior talent come from tomorrow? If we automate away the learning phase of a career, who is going to be left with the human judgment to actually oversee the AI in the future? Think about that as you plan your next career move. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and we will catch you in the next one.